Hello, good morning, everyone. It took about 700,000 years for YouTube to go live. I thought for a minute it wasn't going to happen, but we're here. Let me turn on Instagram. Hello, Instagram. It is Monday, June something. Hold on. 29th, June 29th. You think I would check these things before I go on? I know I'm always going to say what day it is, and yet here we are. Let's take a drink. Maybe that should be a game. Every time I screw up, we take a drink. Make sure you have water. Otherwise, this is not going to end well. Today, by special request, because I had no idea what I was going to read today, I'm going to read the prologue and chapter 1 of Besphinxed, because it was Michelle who asked if I could please read Besphinxed. So here I am. This is actually book 3, but you don't have to really know what had happened in book 1 or 2. It just, I don't know, helps. Actually, what helps the most is if you read the short story that's in Merry and Bright before this. You get all the backstory in the setup, but it's not required. So to that end, I think perhaps I should have Besphinxed week, When Tinker Met Belle week, and Truth About Cats and Wolves week backwards, in backwards order. Because you know what? It's me, and I make the rules, and I'm the Red Queen, and all the ways around here belong to me. So, also, just FYI, my father is coming by to mow the backyard at some point before it gets too bloody hot, because it's Florida and it's really disgustingly hot. So my apologies if sorry, that was not him, that was me. My apologies if the sound suffers at some point in time. It's my backyard. So, shall we begin? Besphinxed, part of the Nocturne Falls universe. Read by the author, Alethea Contis. For my dearest Mary B. Rogers, fairy godmother, parade comrade, and sister in magic. Mary Rogers walks with me in the Dragon Con parade. I tell people these books are like if Dragon Con was a town 24/7. One day, perhaps, I will write my own town based on Dragon Con 24/7, since we're probably not going to have Dragon Con this year. And it isn't that scary. All right, ready? Here we go. Prologue. Midwinter Masquerade. Heather Hayden's life was so difficult. Unlike the preternaturally gorgeous nymphs and mermaids and shifters at Harmswood, Heather had to actually work at being beautiful. As a witch, she could have just whipped up a simple glamour for the evening, but that sort of unapproved spell work wasn't allowed at school. Plus, since the whole Nashville incident, when she'd accidentally cursed Kai Xanthopoulos' stupid wolf boyfriend, long before he was even Kai's stupid wolf boyfriend, the administration was watching Heather like hawks. She couldn't pull the forgiveness instead of permission card like she had in the past. With all these limitations imposed on her, it was excruciating work to maintain an ordinary level of beauty and attention, never mind an extraordinary one. Mother hadn't understood why Heather had wanted a new dress for the Midwinter Masquerade. That wasn't a surprise. What with Taylor, the sister who could do everything, about to get married, and Katie, the sister who couldn't do anything, causing the usual amount of trouble, Ambrosia Hayden simply didn't have the time for her middle daughter. She'd poured another glass of white wine and instructed Heather to choose something from Taylor's massive closet full of gowns. Heather had borrowed Daddy's credit card instead. Not that Daddy cared about her needs any more than Mother did, but if there was a problem that could be solved by money, Daddy simply solved it, and the world went on spinning. Deciding on her attire for the Midwinter Masquerade had been especially challenging because everyone dressed to the nines. Mildly attractive students that normally flew under the radar were elevated by the wow factor. On top of that, everyone wore masks. The obvious way to rise above the crowd was to possess the most ostentatious mask of all. The more subversive route, which Heather preferred, was to make her mark by being completely understated. She'd chosen a silk dress, black, of course, her signature color, to stand out against the wintry landscape of the gymnasium with its frost-lined paths and silver birch trees and snow globe-topped ice pillar centerpiece. Heather's dress covered more than it revealed, hugging her curves like a 1940s pinup model. She accessorized with strappy dominatrix heels, her star and moon choker, an elegant mask made of feathers from a black swan, and Polaris Brighton. The second she'd seen the lanky winter elf walk through the gymnasium door, she made a beeline for him, past the snow globe in the middle of the room as fast as her designer heels could carry her. Bright was an old family friend, the heir to his father's fortune, and the brother of the guy her perfect older sister was about to marry. He was practically family. Sure, he was also aloof and a bit of a recluse, but that only added to the mystery of him. Heather loved the looks on her friends' faces when she pulled her celebrity almost brother-in-law-ish over to the trees to meet everyone. But she was only halfway through introducing Bright when the fey trash girl he walked in with rudely interrupted. "Owen, you know Taylor, right?" Owen Liddell, nobody cat shifter from nowhere, was suddenly shoved in Heather's face. "It's Heather," Heather snapped. The fey girl was obviously crazy. No one in their right mind ever mistook her for Taylor. "I know," the girl snapped back with equal fervor, and then she grabbed Bright's hand and dragged him away. Heather gaped. This sort of embarrassment did not happen to her in public. She needed to find a way to save face, and quickly. Her momentary shock gave Owen time to recover. "Sorry," he said in a perfect example of that wow factor handsomeness. He smoothed his tuxedo and straightened his ridiculous cat-eared headband. Wasn't he a cat shifter? Why didn't he just half shift? He took Heather's outfit in from head to toe and gave her a rakish grin. She probably should have cringed, but Heather appreciated being appreciated. Besides, her mask hid most of her facial expressions. She could always tell her friends that she cringed. They'd believe her. "Wait." Owen squinted at her, and her grin faded. "I know you." This time, Heather did grimace. "Of course you know me. Everybody knows me." "The god-awful goth witch of Harmswood herself." His accent was so British it sounded fake. "I'd say I was pleased to meet you, but I know what you're about." He sucked his tongue and wagged a finger at her. "Naughty little witch." "Yes, I'm horrible and evil, I know." She held her chin high. Owen was Kai Xanthopoulos' best friend. Whatever he thought he knew about Heather, he'd learned from Kai's biased lips. The low-class local girls were always making up lies about Heather. They were jealous of her wealth and beauty and power, the power that her popularity afforded her, if not actual magical power. "No," he said dismissively. "I've met evil. You're nothing of the sort." Heather was prepared to argue with Owen for just argument's sake when she was interrupted by the imposing form of Duke Bardou. Duco was a senior, a wolf shifter, and a quarterback of the Harmswood football team. All those muscles combined with a mass of dark hair and brows that arched dramatically over piercing gray eyes made him the most gorgeous guy in school. Duco was also a massive jerk. But Heather's popularity could not afford to dismiss his status or beauty over a little thing like that. Heather put up with a lot in her life. Duco was by no means the worst, just the most recent. "Dance with me," he said. Duco Bardou did not ask for things, he demanded them. "I thought you'd never ask," said Heather. She immediately turned her back on Owen and tried to lose herself in the music. tried because Duco's hands were all over her. She used the dancing to subtly move away from him, but he rubbed up against her like he had an itch and she was a tree. She closed her eyes, pretending to enjoy being manhandled while she was waiting for the song to be over. She felt him lean in and sniff her hair like the wolf he was. His breath stank like he'd eaten something rotten. "Hear ye, hear ye!" The unmistakable voice of Hubble Hobson rang out across the gym. Oleander, who always preferred DJing to dancing, stopped in the middle so that Hubble and his misfit friends could make some announcement about their latest school-sponsored crap fest. "Drama freaks," muttered Duco. He dropped his hands. Heather stepped back, sending up a silent prayer of thanks to the goddess. When the music started back up again, it was a waltz. She instinctively held out her right hand, muscle memory from her coming out balls. She may as well have been offering Duco a bouquet of Hello Kitty pencils. "Seriously?" he sneered. In a flash, Owen was suddenly between them. He took her outstretched hand in his and placed the other lightly at her waist. "I've got this," he said, deftly spinning her away from Duco and the rest of her friends. Heather waited for Owen to continue their argument or to put his hands all over her as Duco had, but he did neither. He kept their bodies a respectable distance apart and simply danced with her in silence. He knew how to waltz, too, a thing Heather would not have expected of a guy of his poverty level to know. He danced and he stared at her, his green gold eyes utterly expressionless. Heather went from feeling threatened to wondering what Owen expected from her. But as his silence continued, that feeling began to diminish as well. If he planned to make a move on her, he would have done so by now. If he planned to make Kai jealous, he would have held Heather a lot closer. Owen had told her she wasn't evil. He'd obviously witnessed Duco's version of dancing. Had Owen stepped in with those cat reflexes to save her from the wolf? Heather had never been anything but horrid to Kai. Owen had no reason to be nice. Was it possible his intentions had simply been honorable? Did boys like that even exist in the 21st century? Owen continued to stare at her, as if those green gold eyes could see into her soul, as if she were the only other person in the world, as if she was important. The longer they danced, the more Heather felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, possibly ever. She felt safe. She resisted the urge to cry or to thank him. She just wanted to go on dancing in silence forever. But he must have noticed something, because the muscles in his hands and arms suddenly became stiff. His brow furrowed slightly. In the next step, he turned them both so his body was between her and the snow globe. Heather was not watching the snow globe when it exploded. She was staring into Owen's eyes. He was on top of her in a heartbeat, his body covering the length of her. Through him, Heather could feel the blast of magic slam into Owen's back, and yet, almost as quickly as they'd hit the deck, he was standing again, offering her his hand. She took it. "Are you all right?" she heard him ask over the ringing in her ears. The snow globe, and half the pillar on which it had stood, was gone. Students were sprawled on the floor around them. "Heather, are you all right?" he asked again. She nodded, not wanting to break the silence between them. He cupped her cheek in his hand, and then turned to run into the heart of the chaos, presumably to find Kai. The back of his suit jacket was covered in glitter and fake snow. Heather looked down at her own dress, still completely clean. Owen had protected her. Hello, everyone on Instagram. Hi, YouTube folks. Chapter 1, 5 months later. All in all, Owen liked school. Education had been a luxury beyond his family's means back in 1912. When Owen was barely 7 years old, His doughty mother had scrubbed him red and dragged him by the ear all the way to London to meet the noble Lord James Liddell, Baron Greymere. She'd been armed with nothing more than her wits and the feeble tale of a weak family connection, but luck was on her side. Just that morning, the Baron had decided to pursue his dreams of archaeology in North Africa, and he had a particular need of a companion. That a poor young boy had shown up on his doorstep with neither agenda nor prospects was more than simple providence. Dubious relation or no, the Baron declared Owen a gift from the ghosts of the kings they were destined to discover beneath the shifting sands. Owen never saw his family again. A decade later, the Baron had discovered little of significance. The mass of his fortune had been stolen by a deceptively beautiful descendant of Arachne, and Owen had been bewitched into the form of a cat for all time. Or until he found a legendary fury, which he had last year. That fury had manifested inside his best friend, Kai Xanthopoulos, and she had unmasked him for the cat shifter he now was. The crux of the matter was his orders had been to kill the fury once he discovered her. Murdering Kai would release Owen from the great Sphinx's spell entirely, turning him back into the young man he'd been once upon a time. But in the time they'd known each other, Owen had become emotionally invested in Kai. He cared too much about her to finish the mission to which she'd been assigned. And then Kai had found her soulmate in the wolf shifter, Finn Kincaid. Stalwart, loyal Owen refused to give up on Kai. There might have been a romantic future for them, but that didn't matter. Owen would never betray Kai. She was his best friend, and he meant to keep it that way for as long as they both lived. Historically, Owen had not been lucky with friends. A financial barrier, and then a language barrier, had separated Owen from boys his own age. As much as he'd loathed getting to know Kai's companions and having to share Kai with them, he'd come to realize that he actually enjoyed having them around. Not that he'd ever admitted. Owen followed Kai and Finn down the right-hand side of the family and Consumer Magic's classroom and claimed a desk directly behind them. "I wonder what adventures are in store for us today," Owen asked mischievously. Kai laughed. Even Finn cracked a smile. According to Professor Mayfield, every day was an adventure. Some days were adventures, like the day Professor had taught them how to sew magical bags of holding, and Duco Bardu had used one to smuggle his friend Zev into the girls' locker room. Some days were great failures too, like the time they tried to spin straw into gold and ended up with nothing but blisters. But Professor Mayfield was a well-meaning, jolly old sort, so the students always played along. This day, however, it was not Professor Mayfield who entered the classroom. Professor Blake, head witch of Harmswood, walked through the door instead. With her wiry salt and pepper hair pulled back in a tight bun, she looked more severe than usual. She stood between the iron stove and the spinning wheel at the front of the room and cleared her throat. When Duco Bardu kept talking, Professor Blake raised her hand and pinched her fingers together. Duco's lips promptly pinched shut, and he gave her his undivided attention. "I'm sorry to report that Professor Mayfield has taken ill," said the head witch. There were murmurs of dismay in reply. The announcement surprised Owen. Professor Mayfield was not young by any means, but he had seemed quite hale when they'd left him the previous day. "I would like to introduce the temporary replacement, Miss Debbie Sunshine." That was a real name? Owen could not stop himself before a snort escaped. Kai leveled him with her stare. Owen shrugged and motioned to the rest of the snickering room. The laughter stopped when Miss Sunshine entered. She wore a fitted gray purple business suit, buttoned casually over a cream silk blouse. The skirt of it fell to right above the curve of her calf. The bronze skin was flawless, her generous smile equal parts plump red lips and perfect teeth. Her large brown eyes were framed in black rimmed glasses, and her chestnut hair fell in massive waves to the small of her back. It was a wonder that Miss Sunshine had chosen teaching as a profession. She could have easily beaten out Gal Gadot for the role of Wonder Woman. Yes, it was the only moving picture Owen had ever seen as a human, but that was beside the point. The next thought to occur to Owen was that Miss Sunshine was the second most beautiful woman he'd ever seen in his life. The most beautiful had been Arachne Salamis. 100 years ago, Arachne Salamis had defeated the Baron and dared Owen to stare into the eyes of the great Sphinx before ordering him to assassinate a Fury. Debbie Sunshine bore a remarkable resemblance to the woman. Too remarkable. Against his will, Owen's body began to tremble. Sick to his stomach, he tore his eyes away from the woman standing next to Professor Blake. He diverted his attention to the rest of the room, where the other students gaped at the glorious Miss Sunshine. Well, every student but one. At the opposite end of the room, Heather Hayden studied his expression. Owen was having trouble breathing, but he forced himself to remain stoic. He refused to reveal his fear to anyone, least of all his best friend's mortal enemy. Heather's ice-blue gaze never wavered. They had stared at each other like this once, last year, during the midwinter masquerade. He'd been torn away from Kai's side, as he knew he would be one day, by none other than Bellamy's peculiar older sister. But there had been a moment the length of a dance, in which a victimized Heather Hayden had sought solace in Owen's arms. Privileged and arrogant as she may have been, Owen's heart had gone out to the young witch. She was not the first person in his very long lifetime to make a few bad decisions. Kai had not needed him in that moment, but Heather had. For one dance, she was not the god-awful goth witch wreaking havoc over all of Harmswood. She was simply a fellow student in need of an ally. When the Goblin King's magic killed the snow globe, Owen's moment with Heather was over. As soon as Owen had protected Heather from the blast, he'd returned to his place near Kai, where he belonged. Neither he nor Heather had ever mentioned the dance again. Right now, it was Owen who needed refuge. He felt himself wishing for that moment on the dance floor again, that feeling of peace. He wished there was a way to let Heather into their circle without betraying Kai, but it was a pipe dream. Kai would never allow Owen to be friends with Heather. Heather, surrounded by her rich friends and hangers-on, would never have allowed it either. On a normal day, Owen would have pretended not to care. This was not a normal day. If the Arachne sisters had found him, there would be a reckoning, and soon. Geez, why don't you take a picture or something? It'll last longer. All heads turned to Heather in response to her snide comment, breaking the smell Miss Sunshine's presence had placed over them. The left side of the classroom jeered in solidarity. There are enough photos of you in the world already, Owen shot back. Surely we don't need another one. Kai wasn't the only one on the right side of the room who giggled at this retort. Children! Professor Blake clapped her hands together. Enough of this nonsense, thank you very much. I trust you to treat Miss Sunshine with the same respect you give Professor Mayfield. The head witch turned to Miss Sunshine. I leave them in your very capable hands, my dear. Best of luck. Owen wanted to cry out after Professor Blake and beg her not to leave, denouncing Miss Sunshine for the imposter she was. But it had been 100 years. What if he was wrong? What if Miss Sunshine was simply a lovely woman from one of those rectangular states out west? On top of that, being a 100-year-old cat shifter didn't make Owen anything special. At this school full of extraordinary individuals, he was just another teenage voice in the crowd. Good morning, class, said Miss Sunshine. Her voice was thick and rich like cold honey. The Arachne he'd met in Egypt had a voice that was higher pitched, with an affected Middle Eastern accent. This woman sounded 100% American. In light of the fact that Professor Mayfield will be out for some time. Is he sick? Like, bad sick? Bellamy asked with honest concern. She was the sort of fairy who wrote thank you notes to the teachers and at the end of every semester and encouraged the rest of her friends to do the same. Owen had blamed his failure to do so on his terrible penmanship. Cats didn't write thank you notes. Cats never wrote anything down. The art of speaking cryptically was one of Owen's favorite aspects of being a cat. "I don't know all the details," Miss Sunshine said with perfect innocence. "I was given to understand that he might not return before the end of the school year." 6 weeks? If Miss Sunshine really was one of the Arachne sisters, Owen would be dead before the end of the term, or Kai would. Owen wanted to throw up again. Miss Sunshine pulled what looked like a small rug from her bag and unrolled it so that it dropped down in front of Professor Mayfield's desk. Bellamy gasped from her chair in the front row. "A unicorn tapestry," she said reverently. "You expect us to make that?" Heather asked with her usual brashness. "From what? Fresh unicorns?" The left side of the room chuckled. Miss Sunshine's lips formed a perfect moo as she stared down at the tapestry, but it was obvious that her distaste was over Heather's suggestion. "It's true. The skill level to recreate this piece is incredibly high. My forte is fabric crafts, but I was told that Professor Mayfield covered that topic last semester." There was a sigh from Bellamy, no doubt devastated over the fact that she wasn't about to be given a unicorn as a homework assignment. "To that end," continued Miss Sunshine, "any student who chooses to attempt a recreation of this tapestry will get extra points that will count toward their final grade. The best replica will receive the most points." Owen tried to swallow. His mouth was dry. The original Arachne had challenged the goddess Athena to a similar contest, and won. A bold move, considering that gods were notorious for being bad losers. As punishment for Arachne's boasting and then shaming a god, Athena turned her into a spider. Arachne and the rest of her spider-shifting descendants had been doomed to weave until the end of time. Every descendant of that first Arachne that Owen knew about was female, and every other one called herself Arachne. The Arachnes wanted a Fury's feather because it would supposedly grant them their proper revenge on Athena. Sure, it could be argued that Athena was in the wrong, but one did not mess around with gods. Owen should know. The great Sphinx who had bespelled him was older than the denizens of Olympus themselves. "Dear Professor Mayfield, please get better soon." The prayer came from Poppy Flanders, one of Heather's closest confidants and the second goth witch. Oleandernarium was the third. Where Poppy was bright and bubbly, Oleander was dark and dry. They complemented Heather perfectly. Her own personal coven. The students called it. Hayden witches liked things in threes, they said. Not that Poppy or Oleander had bothered to rescue their friend that night of the masquerade. "None of you are obliged to try, but the opportunity is there if you wish it." Miss Sunshine picked up a binder and flipped through the pages. Now, it seems that the lesson plan Professor Mayfield filed for this spring concentrated on food preparation. Yes. Since returning after winter break, Owen and his friends had burned popcorn, killed yeast, and discovered the hard way why soups should never be made in reclaimed cauldrons. Having spent the majority of the last century eating out of garbage cans, the slightly off taste of the soup hadn't bothered Owen at all. But every student in Consumer Magics had sprouted rabbit ears that same day. It had taken the school nurse a week to break the spell. The assignment for all Professor Mayfield's classes is to create hors d'oeuvres for the zombie prom. This time, both sides of the classroom groaned. Can someone tell me exactly what this zombie prom is all about? I'm assuming no true zombies are actually invited, as it would cause substantial risk to the students. Your presence causes substantial risk to the students, thought Owen. We just dress as zombies, Bellamy assured her. It's terribly fun. It's the function that marks the end of our school year. Kai said helpfully. Only the best prom ever, Poppy chimed in. Speak for yourself, droned Oleander. Though the music is totally on point. All of Nocturne Falls takes part, added Bellamy. It's a huge celebration. Ah, said Miss Sunshine. This makes sense then. It seems Professor Mayfield wanted his students to contribute to the festivities. I will be breaking you into pairs. Each team will be assigned one food item to be served at the zombie prom. You have until that time to create and perfect your dish to the best of your abilities. Does this count toward our final grade? Asked Tinka, Bellamy's nerdy goblin boyfriend. Miss Sunshine smiled. Yes, I do believe this project is meant to be a large part of your final exam. And the other parts? Oleander asked, as if she cared. So far, the other part consists of you not getting on my nerves. Yes, Miss Sunshine, Oleander mumbled dutifully. She could dish out the disdain. She was horrible to taking it from others. Wait, you are going to assign us into pairs? Heather asked skeptically. I am. I couldn't help but notice that this room seems to be divided for some reason. I'm not sure what defines the line between the two sides, but I hereby dissolve it. She moved in front of the desk and raised a hand. Pretend the room is a piece of paper, and this imaginary line I'm drawing is a fold in that paper. Whoever is your mirror on the opposite side of the room will be your partner for the remainder of the semester. There was no groaning this time, because the students were too busy staring at each other in shock. Did Miss Sunshine honestly think by matching them up like this they'd suddenly get along? If days and months and years of existing in the same rooms and hallways hadn't encouraged the elite to mingle with the bourgeoisie, how on earth was Consumer Magic class going to change that? If Miss Sunshine's ultimate goal was chaos, she was about to get it. This plan was destined to go nowhere, but pear-shaped. The only question was when. Owen quickly did what every other student in the classroom was doing, counting desks to see who had been doomed to spend the rest of the school year with whom. Bellamy and Zev. That might not turn out too badly. Tinka had been paired off with Oleander, a goblin and a pessimist. How utterly depressing. Kai would be with Poppy Flanders. Kai worked at a bakery, so her team had already aced this test unless Poppy decided to sabotage something along the way. Finn was more than a match for Duco Bardu, assuming the two wolf shifters didn't kill each other first. And Hoenn would have to put up with Heather. Of course. Oh, crap, Kai whispered when she too realized Owen's fate. You got screwed. You said it, Owen replied. Consider it my taking one for the team. He took a deep breath. He could do this. He could juggle Heather and Kai, and Miss Maybe Arachne Sunshine, and any other darkness that chose to rain down upon him. Unsurprisingly, Heather had no intention of moving. Owen stood and shuffled past the other reluctant students to the opposite side of the room. He slid a vacant desk over to hers until the two clicked and morphed into one solid tabletop. Most of the desks at Harmswood had this property. The first time he'd seen it, he'd almost hadn't believed it. Casual magic was used in town only if it could be disguised as technology. This sort of everyday magic at Harmswood would have baffled even the sharpest human mind. What's the matter with you? Heather asked the question accusingly, as if Owen had slammed the desk together in anger, which he had not. He slid into the chair beside her so that he would not have to meet her eyes. Part of him wanted to tell Heather that he suspected their substitute of being a member of a cult of women who damned him for a century and intended to kill his best friend. Part of him just wanted to sit quietly in a safe, silent bubble. In good faith, he could not do the former. Kai would never forgive him for telling Heather such vital information. Heck, she'd never forgive him for telling Heather anything. Owen would find a way to handle this on his own. He had to, for the safety of his friends, if not himself. In the meantime, he needed to continue to play the part of Kai's best friend who always takes her side no matter what. A role that included not being chummy in any way with abusive, power-hungry Heather Hayden. "What's wrong with me? I have to deal with you for the rest of the semester," he said. "That would set anyone's teeth on edge." Heather almost looked insulted, and he wished he could take the words back, but the expression disappeared almost as quickly as it had come. "I'm allergic to cats," she said quickly. "No witch is allergic to cats," he said. "Try again." "I'm allergic to idiots." "Not judging by the company you keep. Got any more?" "I'm allergic to poverty," she said. Owen took in her flat iron hair, custom black dress, and boots with more buttons than the ladies' boots on the Titanic. "Now that I believe." Bellamy, who had cheerfully volunteered to pass out the assignments, handed Owen a card. "Good luck," she whispered. Her wish wasn't about the recipe. If only Bellamy had sprinkled a little fairy dust on that card, Owen might have stood half a chance with everything. Heather snatched the card out of Owen's grasp and flipped it over. "Chocolate chip cookies?" she read aloud. "Bah! Piece of cake!" Owen decided not to point out to the witch that cookies and cake were two entirely different things. Not that it mattered. However he sliced it, he was doomed. And that is the first chapter of Besphinxed, the Nocturne Falls universe story that won the Scribe Award in 2018. I think it was 2018. I've lost count. It's on Amazon. All of these are available on Amazon. The reading order is available on Amazon and my website. I couldn't even send you signed copies because I don't have them. So please, if you would like to read more, feel free to order it. The link is in my bio. And on Thursday, I will be reading my favorite chapter from this book and perhaps talking a little bit more about it. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I will see you again on Thursday. Remember, my life is better with you in it, so please stay safe and stick around. See you later.